The Reserve Bank's Monetary Policy Committee yesterday increased the repo rate by 50 basis points, and the General Industries Workers Union of South Africa is not impressed. The Workers Union says it will soon join the Trade Union Federation, SAFTU, in its picket outside the Reserve Bank's Pretoria offices. GIWUSA is also calling on workers' movements to intensify campaigns against the high cost of living and the ANC's neoliberal onslaught on the working class. For more on this, we are now joined by GIWUSA President Mametlwe Sebei. Mr. Sebei, thank you so much for joining us this evening.
Thank you.
Now, the MPC raised interest rates by 50 basis points yesterday, and your organization has put out a statement towards this and saying it's a cruel determination of the ruling elite to offload the burden of economic crisis onto the working class. Why do you believe that this is deliberate?
Well, firstly, you have got to see this is the 10th consecutive increase since the beginning of what you call post-normalization, September, November 2021, which have increased interest rate by up to 475 basis points at the moment. And what does that mean? It means, the cost of servicing debt, on home loans, on vehicle repayments, on credit facilities has increased. Insofar as, for instance, home loans is concerned, people are paying 40%, on the cost of debt compared to what they were paying. And we say that, this is really a determination to make the working class to pay because it is not really just about fighting inflation. Firstly, we argue that there are other alternative ways of fighting inflation because for us, the key and the key cause of the inflation at the present moment are both external, but I think domestically it has to do with monopolization of the economy. The fact that 175 industries in this country are overly concentrated, are monopolized according to, Competition Commission, and the very same Competition Commission in its essential food price monitoring last year concluded that the increase in the price of, bread and of course meat were unreasonably and unjustifiably increased as a result of these monopolies taking advantage of the crisis. Now, we see that it has to do with obviously South Africa addressing its unfavorable flow of capital because of the trading balances with the major trading partners. And that has to do with the collapse of the economy, the collapse of the industry, for which the working class have nothing to do, but it has to do with the failure to invest in the productive sectors of the economy and the public infrastructure by the state, by the private capital.
So, you speak of alternatives that could be put in place in order to curb inflation. If the Reserve Bank did not take this decision of increasing by 50 basis points, what could they have done differently?
Well, firstly, our view is this, right? The reason that they are, like for instance in industries that are monopolized, right? Like energy, production, which is a state monopoly. Prices are regulated because it is a monopoly. You can't leave monopolies to control, to determine prices, right? Now, we say that if about 175 industries are monopolized, which is what Competition Commission is saying, it means that these are industries that has to be, regulated. The prices must be controlled, and we would argue that control must be on the basis of the democratic working class participation in the price control and regulatory authorities. But more than that, we say that because these are monopolized industries, right, for us they have to be nationalized because monopolies on the basis of private ownership and profiteering, this is what we are going to do. They are not going to operate in the interest of the people who are in need of basic food, basic clothing, basic housing and all the things for which we take loans, for which we take credit, right? They operate in the interest of profit. And we say that bring this into a public ownership, but more than that also bring the financial sectors of the economy to ensure that the savings, to ensure that the wealth, the capital of society is mobilized to build and revitalize the industries, to make sure that we build the necessary public infrastructure. Because part of the reason that even private capital, by the way, is not investing is because of collapse, is because of the low level of productivity. And what's the reason for that? It's because we have not been investing on education. We have not been investing on health. We have not been investing on transport. for the workers, for the goods. We've already been investing on energy production, in water outages, in water supply. We've not been investing on our roads. So this is the reason that the productivity is low, and capital in turn is not investing on equipment, on the technology, on the machinery. And this is the reason when you look at capital formation, that is capital expenditure by private business has been plummeting, right? This year, it was 10% below what it was in 2021. It was 16% below what it was in 2015. It is below, is 50% less than what it was at the height of the economic boom in 2007. This is a crisis we are facing. The ruling class has no alternative, and that's the reason we say bring the economy under public ownership, and the working class must build a movement to seize that power, because we're not going to be in that economy. That's going to require a political organization. That's going to require revolution in this country.
Most certainly. In closing, we have less than a minute. In some of the suggestions that you have is the resignation of the Board of Governors, as well as price controls, especially for basic essential foods like you're mentioning now. What are some of the most pertinent things that you believe need to change within the South African Reserve Bank?
The thing is, creation of unemployment is an intended aim of this inflation targeting policy, because there is a theory called, non-accelerating inflation rate of unemployment. By that they mean that if you have a problem of inflation is due to an upward, a demand in terms of the wage increases of the workers. So the way to discipline them, you actually reduce the level of unemployment, impose poverty, and when workers are too disparate to be demanding wages, that's how you control inflation. And that is a reason that what they are doing is that they are forcing distress, they are forcing credit defaults, but it's not just credit defaults of individuals, it's also liquidation of small companies that we've seen in terms of the number of growing sequestration, liquidations, which has a correlation with the beginning of this policy normalization. Ultimately, they want to force the levels of unemployment, the levels of poverty to a level where the demand is put down in a way that then they think it will bring down the prices, because for them the main problem in the economy at the present moment is inflation. And as Khanyago himself said, right, this is the disease that as a doctor we must cure and must treat, and therefore we're going to administer the medication. You must take the medication, otherwise you are faced with a surgery and ICU. So they are going to impose these credit defaults, insolvencies, financial distress on the working class alongside unemployment, and unless the workers' movement begin to organize, begin to campaign, and we say we must campaign to make sure that we have the People's Central Bank that can work in the interest of the working class, in the interest of the majority, in the interest of society, not just the financial monopolies, but also the speculators and swindlers who operate in a foreign exchange market, where basically they trade on currencies. And in this situation, they basically want to maintain differential in terms of interest rate, right, between South Africa and the U.S., in particular. That's the reason they're telling the Fed to make sure that there's a, that favorable, differential where they will be able to attract, that is, people buying money, bringing the money from the dollars and other low interest rate economies, right, to buy a high interest rate rent in order to make money out of money, right? That's a problem. And we say that we've got to be able to address the fundamentals in the economy. But you can't do that on the basis of capitalism in this period. The only solution they have is a brutal austerity, is brutal and a cruel logic of interest rates, but also impoverishing the working class in order to fight inflation. And we need alternative on that.
Do we see an end in sight? Do you believe that this continuous increasing of interest rates will now finally come to an end?
It won't, because, obviously at some point there's a limit to how far they can go. But that would be against the background of a disastrous, conditions for the masses of the working class, but also the middle class people, right? Who, let's remember, there's about 27 million people who are credit active in this country, right? Many of them already the lowest income bracket of 3,000 to 8,000, 1.3 million, defaulted just in the last 3 months of 2022 alone, right? The middle class, that is actually the upper layers of the working class, earning between 10,000 and 20,000, many of them are actually having a debt-to-income ratio of 125 to 165%. And we are saying that we are seeing them selling houses, selling vehicles, going on credit defaults on their credit facilities. For what? Because of these interest rates that are being hiked on the basis of the factors that are not about to go away anytime soon. The war in Ukraine has no end in sight, right? The collapse in the economy, the energy crisis that they have created, right, of ESCOM, it's not about to go inside. Why? Because, ESCOM is bankrupt. And when you look even at the proposal that they are making, right, to bail out ESCOM, it's not about adding a new capacity to overcome the problem. It's actually about bailing out the bankers and the financiers who have invested in a debt and have been buying the bonds and, of course, the debt at ESCOM and so on. Those are the people that they are bailing out, not the working class who are suffering the relentless blackouts, but also the consequences of this energy crisis in a form of unemployment, in a form of crime, and increasing poverty and misery that we are seeing in our communities.
Mr. Sebei, unfortunately, we have come to the end of our time this evening. Thank you so much for joining us. Very insightful there. We are hoping that the middle class will be able then to pull through these very difficult times that we are facing. And as you say, there certainly is no end in sight. That was Mametlwe Sebei, the president of General Industries Workers Union of South Africa, speaking to us there about the hike in interest rates that we saw with 50 basis points yesterday and saying that this is deliberate.